Okay.
All right. Hello, everyone, parents, friends who are joining us. Thank you for watching this. We just wanted to make a quick video. I invited my friend Will Snipes, who is very wise, has had an impact on a lot of young guys that I've known, who's had an impact on my life. I wanted to invite him to talk with me about social media, how we should interact with students on social media, how we should view our students and our kids going on social media, just kind of discuss social media in general. And hopefully it can be something informative that our parents and all of us, maybe even students watching this, can take this information and use to just walk in a more wise way. So as we get in, I'll introduce Will a little bit better, how I met him in a second. But first, for our parents, I told him I was going to do this. I have to address, I'll just get this right out of the way, all right? I shaved my little chin right here because by the time this is out, I'll have already done this Zoom meeting with our students, but I'm going to draw a little brown, connector to my horrible facial hair just to be silly, okay? So now that's out of the way, we can deal with that. Now we can get straight to the point, be serious, have some fun. But again, this is Will Snipes. He lives in Greenville, South Carolina. I hope that's okay that I share where you live. But
Yeah.
I met him at my first position at a church as a youth pastor. A few guys that I really had been pursuing that were in my student ministry, they actually had a connection with him and would go over to his house on a weekly basis for Bible studies. And so heard about this character, this guy who was involved in another church doing these Bible studies. I was like, okay, who is this guy? What's he teaching? These guys I really care about. I just wanted to make sure he was solid. So he welcomed me over to one of their Bible studies. And I went over there, met him, and I mean, he is a extremely solid man. He loves Jesus with all his heart. I believe that. He has spent so much of his life pouring into the younger generation, and he cares so much about the younger generation. So he's grown to be someone that I highly respect and value as a brother in Christ. So yeah, I thought it would be good to invite you on here and have you speak into this topic and just get some information. So anything you want to share before we get straight into it?
Well, and I had a few of your kids at camp last summer too, right?
Yes. I should have mentioned that. So then it was crazy because so you teach English for, was it 8th grade?
6th grade.
6th grade. I don't know how I got those mixed up, but he is a 6th grade English teacher. Did you end up retiring?
No.
Nope.
Well,
Okay.
definitely not now. I don't know what's
Oh,
going on now, but
I know, it's
um,
crazy.
yeah, I'll be back next year for sure.
Okay, well, cool, awesome. So during the school year, he teaches 6th grade English, and then over the summer he works with Fuge Camps. And so this past summer we took our middle schoolers to Fuge Camp, and he was actually the speaker. So it's kind of an awesome little bump in, God kind of placing us, on that same path. And it was just cool to see you and be able to have you engage with our students. So yeah,
That's me.
that's you. Well, do
That's
you
me.
want to share anything else, or do you want to just jump right into
Let's
it?
jump right in.
All right, let's jump right in. So I'm just going to ask you these. I have 6 questions written down. We might ask a couple more. But the first question I want to ask on the topic of social media is, what are some of the benefits for teenagers using social media? Or are there any? Do you think there are any benefits?
The first thing that came to my mind was obviously with the things that we're going through right now. There are benefits in that kids are able to connect with things like this, with their youth ministry, with worship meetings, all that kind of stuff, just similar to what we as adults are doing. And I know a lot of youth ministers, and I don't know how much you do this, Matt, but a lot of student ministers use social media to advertise, publicize, do fun things, do crazy things. They're always putting things out there, and that is how a lot of kids know
Mm-hmm.
about what's going on, what's happening Wednesday night, bring a friend, this crazy game, whatever. One guy in particular that I think of here in the Greenville area he's just really good on social media and is always using that to promote camps and deadlines and all that kind of stuff. So obviously for things like that, it's just kind of how a lot of people get their information now to know about things. When I first saw your question, though, that's really the only thing that came to mind,
Yeah.
that I see being really good about it for a student. And I mean, I'm not going to sit here today and say everybody needs to be off of it, but in
Yeah,
terms of
yeah.
something good that comes from it, that's the first thing that comes to my
The
mind.
distribution of information, kind of, because there, and one of the things as I study a little bit is just even though we might say, and we might get to this a little later on about age, but even though there are kids who are super young who we should probably say, dude, this kid shouldn't have social media at all. They're going to be on it at some point or another, unless I don't know, maybe you're a parent who is totally like hammered down,
Mhm.
that's your decision, but they are going to see it. And so I would agree with that. I mean, it is a good way to get information out. Kind of piggybacking on that. So do you think like a student who goes on there and say they only follow their friends, their peers, and maybe some like pop stars, right? Is there any benefit you think to that? Or is there any dangers to that? Kind of that second question I was going to have is, what are the dangers that we see in using students using social media? So what do you think about that?
Well, it's interesting if you get on there because I follow a lot of kids on Instagram, and I can tell you what almost how each individual kid uses it. I got one guy, he's in ninth grade. He fishes all the time. So all you're ever going to see him posting is Instagram pictures of the fish he caught.
Yeah,
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And
yeah,
it's actually a good connection point for me to be able to text him and say, nice catch,
yeah, yeah.
to connect him with him on something that's important to him. I got guys that dirt bike and, just whatever it is they do, that tends to be what they post. And in places like that, I don't see a lot of danger in that.
Yeah.
It's just a newer version of, let me tell you about the fish I caught and let me
Hmm.
tell you about my new dirt bike. So as we move into dangers, I got this from a friend and I totally love it. And it's for us as adults just as much as it is for students. But two things. Number one is the idea of comparison and how dangerous social media can be to comparison. And the way my friend puts it, or the way I guess he heard it put, is what people are putting on a lot of times is their highlight reel. They're putting on the best of what life has happened to bring their way. And most of us are knowing now that we even like stage moments sometimes for social media, to make
Hmm.
sure that we show our very best to people. And so you're comparing someone's highlight reel to your day in and day out routine.
Yeah.
uh, and that idea of comparison, I don't think is a place where the Lord wants us to be a lot, comparing ourselves to how everyone else is doing and what everyone else has and what everyone else's life looks like. So I think there's a definite danger there, even for students, in terms of appearances and possessions and things like that. It can be just a place to compare. Hey, I'm sitting home by myself and you're with a group of people.
Yeah.
Social media for students and adults can be very isolating and very lonely, when you're home on Friday night and nobody asks you to do anything and you see a group of people posting that they're out doing something. Um, it's a comparison thing and a loneliness, isolation type thing. I just heard a really great message on Sunday, and he was talking a lot about the word lingering and how we should, linger with the Lord, which is just that spending that extra time. Like when you linger, you're just kind of there because you want to be, you're just those extra few minutes where you could be doing something else. You're just sort of lingering with the Lord. And it was an idea he presented because we all have so much time on our hands now,
Hmm.
most of us. And I think when you linger a lot on social media, it it can definitely become your go-to thing. And I've seen that in my own life. Like I
Yeah.
got an extra minute or two right now, I'm back looking at social media again.
Hmm.
And to be honest, and there's a book that I've read some of about social media. It talked a lot about what students are seeing modeled in their parents. And so as adults, there are a lot of adults, maybe some of the ones that are listening right now, that spend a lot of time on Facebook and are
Hmm.
constantly scrolling on Facebook. And while that may not be the social media of choice for most students, they're seeing their parents spending all that time, that being their go-to, that being when I've got an extra minute or two where I am, and then students are just doing the same thing.
Well, I think that all those points, and I feel like, there's just two main points, but then the first point about isolation, then the lingering, and then the parents kind of remembering that whether you're a parent or not, people are going to see what you're doing. And especially as a parent, like my daughter, it's crazy because I always said I'm never going to, hand my kid a phone, but she's wild. She climbs on everything. So to appease her, it's like she gets up and in the morning, one of the things she comes and she tries to grab our phone and just like pushing it at us, like, play this for me. And she probably sees, and I shouldn't say probably, she does see when me and Emily are sitting there, after we eat or something, and we go on Instagram or we go on social media and we begin to scroll for a while. So that's so vital that parents, that we get this, and again, me and Will are not over here saying, hey, we do all this perfectly, come and follow us. We're trying to walk these waters together, right? Like we're trying to get through this and just try to become wiser and wiser and grow in Christ together. So it's just something to keep in mind. Our kids see us and they will imitate us in a lot of ways.
I'll tell you one thing. I mean, I've done a lot of different things myself, but one of them was at one point I was like, all right, I do look at Instagram a lot. I'm going to look at Instagram once a week. That was my thing. And I did that for a while.
Yeah.
And then like a lot of other things, you begin to slip and slide and get back into old habits. But for a while, because, I do sometimes want to see people's babies. Always want to see your baby. Always glad to see your baby. But, see engagements, see babies, see happy moments in people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I tried to set one time a week. And again, it worked for a while. And for us right now, with a lot of the extra time that we have on our hands, that might be for us one time a day. Yeah. Like if we as adults train ourselves, one time a day, I will scroll through Instagram and just, take a look, but not hourly and not every minute.
Yeah.
And
that goal I should set. And the thing is you don't want to set, unrealistic goals, right. But the goal of saying, okay, hey, maybe I look at Instagram for hours a day. Okay, I'm going to move down to looking at Instagram for 30 minutes at one point in my day, whether it's in the morning or at night, all right? Start there. But then this moves on over to, so if we're directing this video towards parents, I know this can just be so hard because say you're a parent and, my daughter's still a baby, so she's not a teenager. I don't exactly know what this would be like, but say they're trying to set this standard. Okay, hey, you can use your phone for Instagram once a day, but maybe that parent right now with all this craziness, the kids being at home, is still having to go to work, right? So they're not getting to necessarily monitor. Sure, there are ways they can set up the phone, but say there's this huge backlash and all this craziness, the teenagers aren't always obedient to Jesus obeying their parents, right? I mean, unfortunately, that wasn't me. And so it kind of brings up the question, okay, as parents, we should set some realistic goals for how we're going to display this to our children. But then how can we as parents walk alongside our children in helping them set up goals? And I know that question wasn't really something that, we talked about before this, but what do you think about that? How could we maybe do that with our kids in a way where we're not necessarily just punching them around, like, do this. We're trying to keep the peace, and, our children should respect us. But again, there's going to be that level of rebellion because we're all sinful. We're all rebellious. So I'm just curious, in your mind, how do you think we can navigate that a little bit?
One thing that I had here for us, but for them too, is I think students always appreciate just open, honest conversations that aren't too heavy-handed and and every once in a while we do have to flex our muscle a little bit. But one question that I really like is, why am I posting this? So, and I know a lot of them are probably looking more at stuff than they are necessarily posting all the time. But you've got some people out there that post a lot and probably post some things they shouldn't post. And so I really like that, just as a parent, to challenge a kid. Hey, every single time you post something, ask yourself this question.
Yeah, that's a very good question.
And I looked at that. My friend was kind of going through this list of your questions with me, and we were kind of brainstorming together. Mm-hmm. But I said, the last thing that I posted on Instagram, it's really good for me to ask myself that question, and I can tell you about it. There's a guy that I taught in 7th grade who now plays football at South Carolina. Mm-hmm. And he was back up here in the upstate, and we got together and went running and talk. We did talk about the Lord. He's a really solid believer and a great guy, and I'd love for him to come hang out with your youth ministry and speak sometime or something.
Dude,
But
awesome.
I posted a picture of me and him, and I'm like, why am I now with this question? I'm thinking, why did I post that?
Mm-hmm.
And half of it at least was, I want people to know that I am friends with a D1 athlete, and he came and ran with me, and I ran with a D1 athlete. So therefore, I'm a really big deal. I just want to make sure you know that.
Yeah.
And that's that part of myself that I don't like, and that's that
Mm-hmm.
prideful. It wasn't the worst thing I've ever done, but I wanted that pointed back towards me. But then another part of myself was like, I want kids to know that I'm hanging out with him, because a lot of kids in this area know of him and respect him and know he's a good dude. And, in my little tag, I put something about, we talked about Jesus, just kind of putting that out there. So it's interesting just to look at your motives on things. But I
Yeah.
think if you begin to ask yourself that question, it can kind of make you think. One fun thing real quick, just with a high school sophomore that was hanging out here last night, had texted me one night, was like, Snipes, I'm getting off Snapchat. I'm deleting Snapchat.
Mm-hmm.
Done with Snapchat. Well, I thought that was awesome.
I hate Snapchat. Just to
Yeah.
put it out there, parents. I
It's
don't
probably the
care.
worst of them all, and I can talk about that. But
Yeah.
and then I guess a few days later was like, I'm thinking about getting it back. So we kind of talked through that, which I think, like I said, as a parent, talking with kids through things like that, instead of just saying no, what are you missing about it? What makes you think you need it back? And so then we kind of reached a little agreement. If you get Snapchat back, you have to buy me dinner. Okay. That's just, And so I was with them last night, and listen, parents, this too. You can tell when a kid's on Snapchat, because they are not fully engaged with whoever else is in the room with them. Because Snapchat is just an ongoing back and forth thing. It's just like they're having a full-on conversation through pictures and words with another person. And I figured that out. I was like, did you get Snapchat back? And he said, yeah, I did. And I said, all right, you got to buy me dinner, And so if it comes up again, we'll talk about it some more. Now, he's a kid I have in Bible study. He's not a kid I parent.
Yeah.
But I don't know. There are no
Yeah.
easy answers, which is not what people want to hear. But
Well, and I think that what you're saying about having that conversation rather than just strong arming, because guys that I'm closer with, this is one of the ways I stumble. I mean, there's guys that I pursue a little bit more, and they would probably flat out tell you, yeah, sometimes Matt can be a jerk, right? Because when I see them, like say they said, hey, I'm going to delete Snapchat, and then they come up and say, hey, I'm thinking about, I can be like, what? You're just being dumb, don't do that. I start to strong arm them a little bit. So I think that's convicting for me, but then also just something very wise that we should acknowledge. I think that maybe we could at some point, and I don't want to drag this on forever. I do think you have a lot of great things to say. But maybe we could talk about in a minute, maybe different types of social media, Instagram, Facebook, and Snapchat. And I don't know if it would be healthy for us to kind of rank them or kind of maybe explain briefly, here's what these are. If you don't know, maybe some parents don't know what their kids are looking at. TikTok, yeah, I think that's important actually. Now that I say that, we maybe just talk about that briefly. Before we move on to that right in a second, I wanted to share a couple scriptures tagging on to that very first point you made about isolation. Isolation is something I hate. The only thing that I really hate about this time is not being able to go and hang out with a whole bunch of different people. I'm thankful I have Emily and Anna Joy, but I miss hanging out with students and friends. And so when I think about isolation and people seeing, okay, this snapshot, this highlight reel of somebody else's life, I think about how much that influences us, right? Makes us think we have to do something a certain way. I'm reminded of whenever I was a sixth grader and I moved to Lexington. I went to Lexington Middle School. I went from a private school to a public school. And in that time, all the kids that I was around at this move, they were just cussing all the time, and they were not like the best influences. But in this desire, this feeling that I had to fit in, I immediately started having the most vulgar language as a sixth grader, right? These people around me influenced me because they were who I was with all day 5 days a week, you know? So in a similar way, when we're scrolling or our students are scrolling on Instagram or TikTok, they're going to want to imitate these highlights or whatever their friends are putting out. And so all of that, I want to connect with a couple scriptures and then we'll move on. But in 1 Corinthians 15:33, Paul talks about don't be deceived. He says, bad company corrupts good morals. And then, I mean, that makes me think about my 6th grade experience, right? But that doesn't, I don't think, just apply to physically hanging out. I think when you began to emotionally attach to people on social media, kids will begin to be corrupted even more. And again, we're already sinful, right? That's our flesh. But I think it will just get worse and worse when we're setting our eyes on someone else as this icon or celebrity, or even someone we know, letting them influence us so much more than we're letting Jesus influence us. And so I think that is just so important when we know that one of the keys of the gospel is we're waging war against our flesh, right? Like we know that we're fallen. And I appreciate you sharing how you struggle, because I remember when I first met you, I thought, man, I was no longer skeptical about this guy teaching kids that I knew. I was like, this guy is awesome. Like he's like walking so like righteous and holy, like he's walking obedient to Christ. And so whenever you share like somewhere that you've messed up, I'm always like, okay, all right, you know, he's still a person. We're still wrestling together, right? So, I mean, I appreciate that. I value that. But I think it's important we acknowledge that these social medias will influence and a lot of times I believe corrupt us, not just our students, but us as adults, as parents, whatever. So I would like to move on to maybe just talking about X amount of social media, you know, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, Facebook. Any other ones that you can think of?
I have a couple things I'd love to say about YouTube and just kids
Okay.
that spend a ton of time on YouTube.
Yes.
That just some things I've learned. So,
Yeah.
you want me
Well,
to come with that first?
how about this? First, just if you had to rank them, and I know this is kind of silly, right? But just for the sake of kind of putting in order if you had to rank them from maybe best to worst, or if I was sitting here saying, okay, my kid, I'm going to allow him to have this social media, but not these social medias or whatever, what would it be in your mind? I mean, I kind of have my thought, but.
Well, Facebook, they're not interested. So you can tell them they can have Facebook all day long. Too many grandmas on there posting recipes and stuff. And, you know, all the adults posting their when they graduated from high school pictures. So kids are not into that. Twitter, to me, I thought was just like political and, you know, not too dangerous because it's just people sort of expressing their opinions and stuff. But I just had a guy this morning, a lot of young guys
Oh,
who
hey, something's going on with the camera, or not the camera, the recording.
okay.
Oh wait, speak again.
Okay.
All right, you're good now.
All right. Guys that struggle with looking at pictures and things like that are accessing those. I knew they accessed those through Instagram, but also through Twitter. So I would say, don't think that Twitter is just like the president and other people talking things that teenagers aren't interested in. There are ways, and I don't want to investigate them, but there are ways to get to images through Twitter. There are definitely ways to get to images through Instagram, and I really hate that because, like I said, I want to think of Instagram as a place to see people's babies and engage in happy moments. But teenagers, especially teenage guys, can find a lot of images and pictures through Instagram, which I think makes it something we need to monitor. Snapchat, I think Snapchat got a bad name when it first came out, just because of the idea that the pictures go away so quickly. And so you could send a picture and nobody would ever see it. And I think you got like a record if it was screenshotted and all this kind of stuff. I don't know that much about it because I don't have it, except to say what we kind of already said, that it's just sort of a waste. It's just a waste of time a lot of times. I think something parents would probably benefit from knowing that some might not know. A lot of kids use Snapchat as their main means of communication. And so they'll tell me, well, I don't want to get rid of Snapchat because I don't have anybody's phone number.
Interesting.
So to us as adults, if I want to ask you if you want to hang out tonight, I'm going to text you.
Hmm.
But a lot of them don't have the contacts that we have and the resource there. And so they message through Snapchat a
Hmm.
lot. So that was something that I kind of learned that I didn't know.
Yeah.
And so then, I'm like, well, hey, why don't you ask a kid for their number and then send them a text? Because that's the way people do it. But that is one thing they use Snapchat for a lot, which, they will push back a little bit and say, well, I don't want to get rid of Snapchat because then there's going to be people I don't know how to get in touch with.
Hmm.
Um, TikTok, I don't know.
Man.
I think
Yeah.
there's just so many things that kids think are funny that I don't.
Mhm.
And so everything that they bring me and show me or send me through to look at on TikTok is just usually not very funny to me,
Yeah.
but I don't know a lot of the dangers out there.
Well,
I think it's interesting that they video these dances, but
yeah.
you
I mean,
keep a little library of them just for you, right? That you don't want anybody to see unless you get it just perfectly and then you put it out there. Is that right?
well, I'm not exactly sure with the recording aspect and saving to some library or whatever, but TikTok, I do know. I mean, and I'm a little different where students can show me TikToks and I'm thinking, man, that was funny. That it made me laugh out loud. Like it was hilarious. Okay. Like I can relate to some of the sense of humor, and sometimes even if it's a little inappropriate, it'll still make me laugh. Like that's which I shouldn't indulge them in that. But sometimes I think that stuff's funny. Where I have the biggest problem with TikTok is like you were saying, these dances. And because Emily recently, about like a few weeks ago, I think she downloaded TikTok, and it seems like you can't go on the app without seeing like some provocative dances and some stuff like with just very vulgar music. And I remember whenever I was younger and I would listen to some vulgar music, and it was as if like it didn't register to me really how vulgar it was until maybe I was a junior or senior. I was just kind of ignorant to it. I was like, oh, it just sounds cool. I knew it was bad, but I didn't realize how vulgar. But some of these things, I'm sitting here like, I'm not trying to be just this adult, supervisor, parenty figure, but this is so inappropriate. This is so disgusting. Like, do you realize not only what you're putting in your head, but then what you're imitating in your own videos? And so, I mean, and just kind of connecting it to what I was thinking about rating these, like, I personally have I think it's funny. Again, I think there's lots of funny stuff on TikTok, and that's my weakness. I love to laugh. I love when things are funny, but it's so vulgar that I would like, my kids will never have an app like TikTok,
Mm.
unless they're sneaking it behind my back, which a lot of kids do sneak social media behind their parents' backs. And so it's something to be aware of, the danger of TikTok, and just kind of, and that's everywhere. Again, just like Will, you were saying about Twitter. Guys can find lots of vulgar stuff on Twitter. You can find it really whenever you look for it, wherever probably.
Right.
But again, I mean, that question of ranking them is actually even hard as I think about it, because part of me just wants to say, well, let's just cut it off. But then I know I always keep Instagram. I mean, that's the one that I'm always going to try to engage on with students to some degree, although I don't think I do the best job of it. But I mean, still, I just really want parents to hear, okay, check and see if your kids are posting something on TikTok, because there's a possibility it could be vulgar. It's a possibility it could be you could be very upset with what they're doing and really just not want them to, for their own safety. Other people are going to see that. Like, you don't know what creep is going to see
That's
your
right.
daughter doing this weird dance, right? So I mean, it's just that one. Me and Emily have had conversations about, and so I'm a little bit more passionate about, and just
And I like it.
I don't know, man, but.
I like it when you get passionate about something like that.
Well, I want to be passionate about Jesus all the time, but then sometimes I get focused on Instagram so much and Netflix, right? That my passion dims and I get passionate for a show, right? It's frustrating. That's one of the dangers, I think, with all this is ultimately we just fill our heads with these things that we enjoy for a time, but then it's over and we're left kind of where we started, but even feeling a little bit more distant than Christ, or from Christ,
Yeah.
than we were when we began. So I don't know. I think that's sort of a thing that kind of bothers me personally. when I see myself. But
We just, remind parents too, as a teacher, we've told parents before, like, remember that you're paying for that phone. I
mm,
mean, I doubt there's one parent listening right now that has a kid that pays for their own phone. I
yeah,
mean, and, I remember we told a parent one time who just seemed at their wits' end about what the kid was doing with the phone. We were like, you pay for that phone. You can take it. You can control what they do to a certain sense. And it was like the parent had never even thought about that before. It was like,
mm,
I can do that. Like, yeah, you can. Bottom line is you pay for it. So,
yeah,
um, and there's the thing. I don't know if you've heard of like it's called a Finsta, and it's like a
yeah.
fake Instagram.
It's like
So
incognito. Okay, it's
yeah.
secret.
So it's just things like that. That it's just the way things have always been, where kids and humans are always going to try to find a way around things.
Yeah,
So they're
yep,
going to say, "Hey, look, mom, here's my Instagram where I just post the nicest, cleanest things you've ever
yeah,
seen. Now I've got this other one over here." So it's just having conversations and being aware and talking to your kid about.
yeah.
And that's what I loved about when you were talking about TikTok is for a parent to say to a teenage girl, just think about all the people that are watching you as you do this dance. Does that make you uncomfortable in any way?
Well, and going like when we think about the age of our kids, our students in ministry and all of this, like kids in general, I know that, I can't remember the study, but your brain is like fully developed when you're 21, somewhere around that age. And I mean, I can see in my life, okay, where when I was 18, 19, 20, and 21, like I just grew so much as a person. I mean, God totally he was at work in that a lot, but at the same time, naturally, He's created us to be growing. And so a 16-year-old isn't going to have the judgment they're going to have when they're 24, right? And so when a parent asks that question, or when we ask a student that question, the hard truth is, I think, some of those girls are going to say, yeah, I don't care who watches it. I'm getting some form of attention. And if they don't say that, I think that that's what a lot of us are thinking. We're thinking we want to be loved, we want to be seen, and we don't feel like we're being seen somewhere else. So we're going to find that, even if it means we're doing something we know is not correct, or something that is not appropriate. And so that's heartbreaking. But I think that's something that we as parents need to really see, and we need to figure out, okay, how can we move along these conversations going back? I think one of the things you're saying is conversations. It's so important that we continue conversations with our kids. I kind of want to draw it towards the end and ask just two more questions. Or really, I might just ask one, because we've kind of covered most of the middle. But no, I'll ask two. First, I want to ask, in your mind, we kind of have covered our opinion a little bit on this, but more explicitly, just how much do you think is too much social media? For
Time wise, I think, well, I had made myself a note here that I think as much as we can begin to tell kids, like, when this crisis and this pandemic is over or is going away and life gets somewhat back to normal, we all need to take a break from a lot of things, and social media would be a big one. And so I think there's going to be some really interesting challenges there in terms of like families that are now able to go and do things that maybe they can't do right now, and are like, let's, and a lot of families are saying, like, we're enjoying this time that we have together, we're playing games and we're watching movies together and doing things that we don't usually do. But when the world kind of opens back up, I think to make a real effort to say to our kids, like, let's get away from that and let's go out and do something we miss doing. You know, I think, but back to your question. Um, Obviously, we've all been in a restaurant before where you looked at a family sitting at a table and every single one of them was on their phone. That's too much. Um, when you're in the car, I love to tell parents, like, that's a great conversation time with a kid is in the car, because you kind of got a captive audience. So if you're driving the car and your student is sitting there and they're just on their phone the whole time, I think that's too much. I think it would be great to say, let's put our phones down and let's just talk. Um, there's got to be out there, there's resources for everything now, like good conversation starters for your kids and things to talk about with your kids, because we can't ask them how their day at school was anymore. But, just find things to talk to them about, so that we're not, I think it's too much when you just see yourself separated from the people that are around you.
Yeah.
Um, Now, like you've brought up several times, and I think it's really important, it's really hard to say right now how much is too much when a parent is at work all day and the kid is at home all day. Except again, I think to kind of give them a challenge of
Yeah.
like, hey, why don't you try doing this today and less time on your phone? And it's hard to say too, because, phones and laptops and all that, kids are also using to do schoolwork right now, hopefully. So where do you draw that line?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if a lot of parents know about, on the iPhone at least, the screen time thing where you can go on there and there's restrictions on there. I find a lot of kids don't have a restrictions passcode set up on there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I would love to just speak to that.
Yeah.
Settings, screen time, and then you'll find down in there where it'll be like content and privacy restrictions. Parents need to set up a passcode on there, and they can go on there and turn off explicit content, but you also can see, I don't know if you have this, like how much time you spent on social media
Yeah.
and how much time you spent on, like reading or,
Yeah. Yeah.
reading
Yeah. News or something. It has
news,
all the
something like
different
that,
things. Yeah.
that might be something that you actually would want to encourage your kid to do.
Yeah.
Um, so, maybe saying to your kid, like, I don't want to assume that every single time I see you on your phone, you're doing something I don't want you to do, because maybe you're studying something or reading up on something. But
Yeah.
it always bothers me when I've got like a 14-year-old guy with the latest, newest iPhone, and it has none of those restrictions on it at all,
Mm-hmm.
which means a parent has just handed that to a kid and said, hey, do with this whatever you want to. And whatever your friends have showed you, whatever tricks they know, whatever things they've been able to access and they're telling you about now, you got full reign, because there's no restrictions on it at all. So,
Well, and I know that there is one specific family who I love, and they do a really good job with setting that screen time and having those restrictions in place in I believe a really healthy way. And the
sure.
reason I believe it's a healthy way is because I don't ever see them fighting. I don't ever see their kids being disrespectful to them, and I think that they do a good job at what we've talked about of, okay, hey, they're setting up these boundaries and these things on the phone. They're not just being ignorant. They're not just going to turn a blind eye to what their kids are absorbing. But then I think that they come over and they're willing to have conversations with their kids. They're willing to say, hey, here's why we're doing this. Like you said, we've bought these phones. We're going to give you access as your authority, as your parents. Sometimes we as kids, we think, and I'm saying we, because if I'm a kid still, I'm still growing, all right? But it's like it feels as if, okay, my parents are over here, but I'm pursuing this individuality to be my own person, where they're not going to be able to tell me what to do forever. Like, it's just that rebellion that keeps firing up. And so I think that sometimes those conversations need to be stern, and they need to be like, okay, let's look at the facts. Let's look at reality here. And so we as parents need to be willing to have those hard conversations, again, not just beating, bashing around, but being very firm, and saying, okay, hey, because we care, we're going to do this and we're going to do it well. And so, yeah, I mean, I've just seen that work really well, and it's been good to see that in another family's life, to kind of say, okay, hey, I want to pursue to do this with my own children.
Mm-hmm.
I want to follow their example because I respect them, and so, yeah, I appreciate that. I'll kind of ask this last question and then we'll wrap it up, because I mean, I'm sure that we've been on here for a while, and I'm happy to be talking to you. But we'll close it up with this kind of, as adults. I mean, both of us, we work with teenagers to some degree. We like to pursue teenagers, to share the gospel with teenagers, interact with them. We're we're not just here to Bible bash them. Like, we want to grow relationship with these teenagers. And so how can we and parents effectively engage with students on social media to the point where it's not obvious that, okay, hey, they're just old, you know, I'm just going to push them to the side. They're being weird. They're being old, whatever. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that? Because I just know even as a 25-year-old, I'm quickly getting out of touch if I'm not constantly running and trying to figure out, okay, what's going on. Gotta be up to date with what they're doing, you know?
Right. Um, I find a lot of times, like, I don't mind asking a kid what something means, or, the newest term or whatever. They're usually pretty cool to tell me,
Mhm.
and not judge me too bad. And I think for me, I got a little built-in advantage because I'm in school every day. I'm in a middle school every day. So you're hearing and seeing the latest trends constantly, you know.
Mhm.
Um, but sometimes I'll say something like in a text,
Mhm.
and I'll almost do it purposefully. Like, this kid either thinks I'm trying way too hard or knows that I'm kind of playing around and joking. And I don't really mind either way,
Mhm.
like, the word bet, like when I'm like,
Mhm.
Matt, you want to hang out tonight? Bet, well, I say that all the time in text because I picked up that they were starting to do it, which they're probably not anymore because that was months ago. But,
Still a
so
little.
they'll be like, "Hey, Snipes, can I come over tonight?" Bet. And then they'll either like text me back, bet, and it's like we're playing. At that point in time, they know I'm trying to get on their level, and they kind of like it. Or I think some other kid might just be sitting there going, "Snipes is so cool. Like, he uses all the same words we do." So regardless, I don't care either way, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, there's probably some kid right now that would say, yeah, Snipes is so dumb. He's always trying to
Mhm.
relate, but you do what you do. So,
And that's really good. I think that's a good place to close out and think, encourage our parents as individuals, no matter who you are. It can be easy to let our egos get in the way.
right,
And so I think that if we're constantly worried about our ego, then we're not going to be willing to look silly in front of some students, because I can never let some kids make fun of me. You know what I mean? Um,
right,
we got to be okay with that, and we gotta show them that, hey, we care, we're pursuing you. You can either let me be a part, or you can make fun of me. I'm still going to be here to love you.
right. And I
So
think the best part is when they make fun of you and they let you be a part at the same time,
yeah,
because then you're in,
dude,
you
I've
know?
got I've got the getting made fun of part down pat, man. I'm the best at that.
Yeah, you're in.
Well, hey, I just want to say thank you so much again for letting me do this with you. I believe this has been a great conversation, and I think that it can be very beneficial to parents who listen. And so, do you have anything else you want to say before you leave? I'll let you shout out something. There might be 20
Shout
people who see this, who watch
out.
the whole thing, right?
That's another big term, shout out. So you're just
Yeah.
showing me how cool you are right now. I don't know. The last thing I had thought about, and kind of goes back to something you were talking about a minute ago, but just finding the right time to have conversations with your kids about things like this. And you were talking about that family that you feel like does a really good job on that. I feel like those things were probably established and set up when everybody was in a nice, calm state. Nobody was angry. Nobody was yelling. Nobody was threatening to take somebody's phone away.
Mhm.
Nothing was being punished. It was just sort of like an upfront expectation.
Yeah.
And so, in the same way, when kids are having problems with their parents, I'll tell them, try to find a time when you feel like you and your parents are in a real good place, and then bring this topic up that you want to talk about. It's probably not right when they get home from work. It's probably not right when they're complaining about how stressful something has been, and then now you're going to,
Yeah.
but just, finding that just right time. But I was also thinking this, and I'll close with this, that, find a way to let your kids know that them having a phone is a privilege.
Hmm.
And that, there's things as a parent that you're required to do. You have to feed your child. You have to
Mhm.
get your child medical care. You have to clothe your child. You have to educate your child. And I think a lot of kids now would say, and you have to get your child a phone. Like everybody has a phone, everybody has full access to a phone. It's really a privilege. And just gently at the right time, not in the midst of an argument, reminding them of that and reminding them that you are the one that is in charge of that. So
Hmm. Well,
that's
thank
all
you
I got.
so much. Appreciate your wisdom on this. I appreciate you, and I can't wait till I can visit Greenville and see you again in person, man.
Let's see us.
I'm gonna stop it here. All right, bye.